That puts gas in a really nice spot. It's not just a transition fuel. It's actually a fuel that can provide a lot of different types of energy services, not just electricity, but heating for industrial applications. That puts gas in a really nice spot. It's not just a transition fuel. It's actually a fuel that can provide a lot of different types of energy services, not just electricity, but heating for industrial applications. It can be used as a feedstock in a hydrogen economy 20, 30 years from now that might be much larger than it is today. There's a host of ways that natural gas can be used to fuel the energy engine that's needed for economies to do what they do.
Yes.
So it's in a good spot.
And I appreciate you saying that. I'm sure the attendees and the audience at the Global Gas Symposium would appreciate your right. They're looking for affirmations and reaffirmations, so they appreciate that. Because the question is, do the renewables, and you talked about the hydrogen economy, right? And so you look at these these countries who are still developing, right? Natural gas seems a good solution, but is there a solution that leaps over, right, and makes, or do you see that even with renewables and anything else, any energy source that is on the radar, that natural gas will continue to have?
So based on what we can see right now, right? Natural gas still has a role. I mean, I'll kind of come really close to home and think about the state of Texas.
Yes.
We generally generate more power from wind than we do coal now.
Yes.
In the state. And that's because we have statewide been very successful at harvesting the tremendous wind energy resource that exists here.
Yes. And the flat land. That's right. The flat land.
It's the state of Texas has 26% of the United States wind capacity.
Wow.
By itself, right? Yes. In fact, just to let you know, I mean, it's number one in wind, number two in solar, and number three in batteries in terms of installed capacity, which if you add up all the megawatts installed makes it number one by far in the whole country.
Huh.
So it's huge, right?
Yes.
But the one thing that's definitely true about all of that stuff is they're intermittent resources. They vary up and down, right?
Yes.
And they vary with nature. And what makes it even more complicated is electricity demand varies as well on a daily basis, right? And within day, right? So in the middle of the morning, it's very different than it is in the middle of the afternoon.
Yes.
Than it is in the middle of the night. So you've got to have flexibility in terms of generating resources to meet that variation.
To match that. Yes. You need to be able to ramp up and down.
Exactly. And what makes that even more complicated is that with non-dispatchable renewable resources, if the wind isn't blowing that day, you've got to have something to make up the gap.
Yes.
And what's really interesting is natural gas, and this is evident in the 15-minute generation data you can download directly from ERCOT. Anybody who's interested in this can see it themselves, right? It's natural gas is the fuel that is providing that flexibility. So as demand has grown over the last 15 years, wind generation has grown over the last 15 years, so has natural gas generation. And you can see them moving lockstep, and they're displacing coal. Nuclear's kind of held steady at the bottom, of the stack.
Yes.
It's when it's on, right? But natural gas has played a tremendous role in facilitating wider scale adoption of renewables in Texas. So now Texas isn't necessarily transposable to everywhere else, right? Some places you might have great hydro resources that you can leverage because you can load follow with hydro too, and you can complement, non-dispatchable with hydro, which is fine. But it's everywhere's different, right? And when you get to certain places around the world that are very large, have massive infrastructures that are being developed, they're looking at renewables as a means to decarbonize. They're also looking at gas because they recognize there is a need for stable, kilowatt hours of electricity.
And do you see the battery technology evolving anytime to an extent where it begins to provide that reliability that now natural gas is providing, right? If he had infinite battery technology, then all the
oh wow, well, yeah, if it's infinite, but you got to remember batteries are generally useful for short cycle storage.
okay.
And so it can definitely help in a given day keep the load that's provided to the grid and provide additional value, by the way, for intermittent renewables. Because if you've got a ton of wind in the morning,
Yes,
it's going to drive the variable cost of energy down to zero, and you don't get a whole lot in the wholesale market for what you're generating. So
yes,
you'd love to be able to load up the batteries and
to
dispatch in the
store it.
afternoon,
Yes,
right? So, but that's an intraday deal. It doesn't completely solve the issue of variation across days, which
okay,
is really what gas is doing. It's
okay,
solving some of the intraday variation, but
yes,
it's really that variation across days. So there'll be and you've seen this in August of last year, there were days when wind generation almost disappeared in Texas,
yes,
right? And batteries aren't going to make up that gap for 2 or 3 days straight. They just can't. And so you still need that flexibility. Now, if you go to a world where you have infinite storage capacity, then you're talking about a totally different deal, right? But
yeah. But I suspect
technologically, we're not there yet, right?
yes,
I mean, and
and
quite frankly, you kind of opened the question, the original question with, do you see anything that could unseat gas?
yes,
I can't see it, but it doesn't mean there's not something out there. I mean, there might be a
yes,
game changer that nobody knows about yet, right? I mean,
yes,
that's the cool thing about technology. You don't know what's coming.
yes,
So.
yes. And to the point about battery technology, I know Tesla was building a plant not far from where I live, and or at that part of town. I live in Sugarland, and they were building it in Angleton, which is I think about 20 miles from here, right? So, and they were building a massive pilot plant, and but it could only serve, I thought, I'm trying to remember, it was a number of homes in the low few thousands, right? And so
yeah, and it's typically like 4 to 6 hour durations, right?
yes, and so you and I didn't have an understanding of what scale of battery would it take, right? And so you compared that and how much resources the battery farms would now require versus natural gas that is available to us, right? So you made the point earlier about digging deeper. We have to dig deeper and say, okay, where does natural gas really step in?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I will say this: the cool thing about batteries is people usually talk about them coupled with like a renewable resource. In reality, the battery doesn't care what it's coupled with; it's storing electrons,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
And I've got a colleague who's done some work looking at this. What the most efficient configuration of a grid would be with utility scale storage. And this is published in a peer-reviewed journal called the Energy Journal, published a couple of years ago. And what he found was that the most efficient use of batteries would be when they're coupled with nuclear power.
Oh,
because
really?
you can overscale nuclear and generate more than you need at night, load up the batteries and dispatch during the day. And it simplifies the grid configuration dramatically. But it also means the batteries are used in a very regular way. They're not just compensating for variation, natural variation. They're actually just meeting variation in load. So it's an interesting outcome, right? But it should make one think, right? And I would say probably the two biggest potential game changers in electric power would be continued innovation in battery technology that could reduce the capital requirement for electricity storage. And the materials requirement for that matter, but also innovations on the nuclear front, right? Things that make it more acceptable. Some of the modular technologies that are being explored today, those two things, if they really were to happen in a concerted way together, would be game changing electric power, without a doubt.